Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, and I am one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me this evening is Thomas Harper, and we're going to discuss Faster, the fourth episode of The Bad Batch Season 2. Thomas, how are you?
I'm excellent. I am still riding high off what felt like a return to Phantom Menace, like an animated Phantom Menace feel episode. I'm a couple weeks out from a Disney trip with the girls, like my daughters and my wife and her family, and yeah, it's good. How about you?
I am well. It's been a busy time, so it's nice to have some Star Wars to be able to discuss. So let's make like the title of this episode and be faster. So all right, so we get into the world of gambling debts because Sig is taken by a former friend, perhaps someone she had some level of relationship with, and after losing a race and to collect the debt, they don't give her time to pay up. They just kidnap her. Enforcement of gambling debts is problematic because it's against public policy in California and Nevada for gambling bets. They're unenforceable in court. You can't take someone to court over a gambling debt. It's just not how it works. So this could cause some interesting self-help situations where we see Sig taken away by someone who is very upset with her. So, not saying that it's ever happened in Vegas with someone left out in the desert, but it creates an incentive for people to get creative because as public policy, we don't want gambling debts enforced in court.
Yeah, the irony of that unenforceability, I think, is that it's generated a need for that sort of creativity. And we don't know a lot about the planet here, so it's Safa Toma, which I don't think we've seen. We definitely haven't seen it on screen. But it had sort of a Tatooine-esque feel, like a little bit of lawlessness to it. There's probably a reason why this sort of land speeder racing is happening here. And so I don't think there are going to be any authorities to stand in the way of certainly not. Well, on Tatooine, you had the backstop of the Hutts, and that sort of kept order to things. They had their own creative ways of enforcing gambling debts, but it doesn't seem like the Empire is really out in force anywhere on this planet. So I think you're going to see a lot of creativity.
Yeah, none of which is good. So
no.
it's just none of you have laws in place to prohibit negative behavior that can cause other negative behavior, such as kidnapping someone. So again, the motivation here is subtext, unexplained. There's clearly a history with the two of them. Something intense happened. So because she's not treated badly. It's not like she's thrown in a cell. But this is not conduct we want to encourage.
Yeah. I do like, as a backdrop, we don't see Hunter or Wrecker this episode, and it's said that they're off on a job hauling Nerf nuggets. And I just like that they've gone from raiding Dooku's castle to hauling chicken nuggets around the galaxy. It's like
soon to be available
anything
at Batuu. I think this is a good creative choice to have that strange chemistry of like we'll send Sig with Omega, Tech, and Wrecker, while Echo and Hunter are off doing something else. It's like, okay, see combos we don't normally see.
Yeah. I should say Hunter and Echo. Misspoke, but
yeah, it's easy to get Echo and Tech confused. So
they all look the same.
So the other gambling issue is Omega, who is a minor, makes a bet for double or nothing. You want to share your issues on the enforceability of that and legality of her even placing the bet?
Yeah, so we see after sort of the race that that Sid sort of goes all in on, believes that her droid Teo, which wonderfully voiced by Ben Schwartz. I'm glad to see him back in action doing a Star Wars voice. But he crashes through some nefarious things that happen on the course, and it looks like the jig is up for Sid. But then Omega steps in and basically makes a pretty big gambit that they'll pay double if Malegi wins. Otherwise, she's free. Otherwise, Sid is free if they win. So, and you just see them sort of all go along with it. Malegi goes along with it, and so it begs the question. We don't know exactly how old Omega is, but it's pretty clear that she's under 18. So in our world, there's a clear line between that's set at 18 years old. We don't want, as a matter of public policy, kids out there gambling. So whether it's sports gambling, whether it's online gambling in the casino, you've got to be 18 to be able to do it by law. And that's pretty universally found, whether it's Las Vegas in the Strip or your local casino if you have one of those, or some of these sports gambling sites, that sort of thing. And that really just stems off that public policy. Gambling can often be a slippery slope for folks that get into it. Kids aren't the best decision makers, and you lack the benefit of sort of a fully developed brain and the reasoning that should go along with it theoretically. And so Omega, as smart and as sharp as she is, would be prohibited by law from entering this bet. Now, it doesn't stop them from taking it, but it might affect the enforceability. But when you're trying to enforce an illegal contract on an unenforceable debt, I think we're back in the realm of creative solutions if it goes south.
Yeah, and we don't want those. There are times when a creative settlement can solve everyone's problem. This is not one of those times. The other factor that we get into is there's a lot of reckless driving here. Teo gets run over and dead. Now, he's a droid, so we can discuss the meaning of life there. And I do think that it's probably a good bet that it was an intentional hit to take him out of the race. Mm-hmm. Well, in California, we do have a reckless driving statute, and I'm bringing that up since I'm a California attorney. So reckless driving under California laws, when someone drives a vehicle upon a highway in a willful or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property, and that's California Vehicle Code 23103A. If someone who is driving recklessly is the proximate cause of bodily injury to another person, they can be imprisoned in county jail for at least 30 days, but not more than 6 months. And that's under California Vehicle Code 23104, subsection A. To prove the intent, the state must prove that the defendant intentionally did something with knowledge that injury to another was probable or acted with a wanton and reckless disregard for the safety of others and in a reckless disregard for the consequences of their action. So the driver gets out, shrugs, and walks away. I'm going to go with we are beyond reckless and wanton at that point in time, from what's either just gross incompetence to a mob hit with a vehicle. And the fact that you have Tech was nearby, Omega was nearby, Wrecker was nearby, like others could have been injured as well, besides the Teo regretting nothing for his life. So It's just problematic. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so this issue here, when I watched it, it stirred up this case that's stuck with me since law school that I've never had a chance to put into any use whatsoever. But your 1L year, your first year of law school is filled with like a lot of kind of dusty old cases, some that date back more than 100 years that are not always interesting. But then came the case of Hackbart versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And the case and the issue that sort of spurred this thought is Teo and the other drivers in this race. Are they assuming a level of risk even for out of bounds type plays? And so it seems, we don't know all the rules for this land speeder race, but it seems like there's a certain amount of violence in it. Some of these speeders are equipped with shields and blasters and whatnot, so there's a little bit of flavor that we don't really have with pod racing. The Hackbart case interested me because it was a case about a play in an NFL game. So Hackbart is was an NFL player. The whole crux of the case took place in this 1973 game between the Bengals and the Denver Broncos. Hackbart's on the field. There's a play by the Broncos. The pass is intercepted in the end zone. Hackbart throws a block as his team now is suddenly on offense, and as the play is finishing, he's watching, taking a knee. The action has gone past him. Now there's another player, Broncos player, guy named Charles Clark, who's like upset, frustrated, just turned the ball over, real costly. And he comes up and with his forearm just throws a pretty vicious blow into the back of Hackbart's head. It causes him to fall forward. There's no flag that's thrown on the play, just for whatever reason. And Hackbart's actually pretty injured as a result of this. So he sues the Bengals as a result of this, saying that, hey, this wasn't a football play. This was like an intentional battery. I didn't sign up for this when I signed up to play football. And ultimately, I'll spare you all the details of the case, but ultimately the suit got decided in favor of the Bengals. And it centered on this assumption of risk that as an NFL player, you are assuming, knowing a certain level of violence, and that includes violence that's technically outside the bounds of what's strictly called for in the rule book. Now, does that mean you could bring a gun onto the field and shoot somebody in the course of a football game and have it covered? Probably not. There are probably some limits, but at least in this context, sort of extracurricular activities, like announcers like to call it, Hackbart's injury was within the scope of sort of a normal football game. And I think that's significant for this land speeder race because I do think all of the racers there knew and assumed the risk of a level of violence beyond just crashing. Teo's ship has defensive and offensive capabilities. He's got shields. He can adjust the power between his weapons and these shields. Clearly, some of the other speeders, as we'll talk about in a second, have weaponry on it. That seems to be a core part of this race. It's like Mario Kart in Star Wars. We can use different weapons along the way. So just getting shot, I think, is clearly within the bounds of the race. Teo or anybody else clearly would have assumed the risk there. And even for a shady move, like the one that they pull on Teo during the whole race, or during the first race when he gets just crashed and defeated, I think even that it just called back to Hackbart that it wasn't so far out of the bounds of what's allowed in the race that it would be unlawful. So I think Teo, even if he were a real human being or you considered him to be a human being, I think he's assumed the risk when he stepped into the cockpit of that racer. And there'd be no recovery for Sid or him.
How about the audience member who gets shot? when one of the racers is spinning out and firing into the crowd.
Was that the first legal disclaimer we've heard in Star Wars?
It might be. It might be, because I was very taken aback with, whoa, they're either writing this for us now. They know that we're here and they're just leaving us mints on the pillow and sending us roses, or they're not. But that was one of the, I think you're right. I think it might be the first time that we've heard any sport event reference the law. And it's like going to a basketball game and getting hit with a basketball in the nose. Yeah, they do take precautions, but people can go to, a baseball game and you have to watch out so you don't get hit in the head with a pop fly.
And some of those precautions, I think, add to the notice that you're put on. I mean, basketball games, one thing, I think, but you talk about professional baseball or professional hockey or racing even, and you've got extensive netting and fencing, and legally, those are the type of things that the law looks to say, okay, were you aware of the sort of inherent danger in what you were doing? Were you aware and could you comprehend that you were in a dangerous situation? And if you see that sort of safety device, it's reasonable for somebody to expect that it's there to block something that's dangerous that could hurt you.
Yeah, I went to baseball games as a child with my grandfather, and he always brought his mitt with him. I mean, like, I share that philosophy.
Yeah.
Be ready to catch. You also have to keep your eye on the ball. Granted, it can vary upon where you're sitting, but no one wants to get clocked in the head. That said, this guy got shot. Like, that's a very different level. Like, are there disclaimers at the Olympics? Like a javelin throw could go into the audience. It's like, I don't. One, that would be bad.
NBC wouldn't like that.
They'd have to start adding 3-second delays.
Yeah. The other aspect of it, the law for this sort of thing in terms of assumption of risk for an audience member, a spectator, varies from state to state. But New York's got a good example of one that's sort of symbolic of what a lot of states look like. And it talks about voluntary participants. So you've paid a ticket to be there, like that poor Ithorian. I think it was an Ithorian that got shot, but that poor spectator there on Sapatoma. So you're voluntarily there watching a sporting or recreational activity. If you've done that, then you consent to what are called commonly appreciated risks that are inherent and that arise out of the nature of the sport and generally flow from that sort of participation. So it's kind of subtly tailored in a way that rule can shift depending on the sport. Getting shot by a gun is probably not an inherent risk or a normal risk in a baseball game. But if you go watch like a biathlon during the Winter Olympics with rifle shooting, it may be. And so here we have a bunch of land speeders that are equipped with blasters that are intended to shoot other racers. It's probably inherent that's an aspect of the sport that could hurt or kill you. And so the other aspect of the New York law is that those risks have to be fully comprehended or perfectly obvious. I don't think there's an issue here. Spectators actively see those speeders shooting each other. It's not like a mystery that these are sort of deadly bolts, not some like tuned down version of it. They seem to be able to shoot everywhere on the track. Like, it's not like they enter into a zone maybe near the start line where they can't operate the weapons. And so, you're walking into a situation like that Ithorian, and you're kind of making a gamble. And in real racing, like NASCAR in particular, since the early 90s, there have been about 29 people at races killed by cars or by flying parts. And you've had about 70 people injured, which in the grand scheme of all the races that happen probably isn't a lot, but yeah, that's a not an insignificant number of folks. And you'll even see that sort of disclaimer and warning language, albeit very generically, on the back of the tickets. And that's, you go to any sporting game, you flip over the ticket or you look on your digital ticket, and there's probably some sort of disclaimer there that adds sort of an extra layer of insulation for the team and the arena as well.
Yeah, it's like, air show accidents. Like when those happen, they can be horrific if a plane crashes into the audience. Like you're at ground zero of it. And same with auto races.
Yeah.
We're going around a tight track. Like it can be pretty horrific.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's area of research. But again, our sport events don't include people getting shot. So like that's the thing that stood out, because the pilot can control when he fires the weapon. So it's one thing to crash. It's another thing to be going sideways, firing the weapon into the crowd. Right. And I think that could be a factor in any lawsuit, to say, I assume the risk of going to this race that someone could crash. I did not assume the risk that someone would fire into the crowd. And I think that would be, the battle that would happen in motion practice.
Yeah. And, don't underestimate the creativity of plaintiffs' lawyers to find a variety of different defendants. So when you look at trying to place responsibility here, it could be from multiple. It doesn't just have to be the racing team or the arena, the venue. A lot of times, real life, those cars have tons of parts on that. There was a case out of Florida from a number of years ago where the hood of a NASCAR car flew off of the car during the race and really seriously injured a spectator in the stands. He was in a coma for a few months, and he wasn't able to recover from the venue or from the NASCAR team, but he did successfully get a settlement from the maker of the latch pins that hold the hood on, just arguing that they were defective. And so here, if you're in a case like that, you'd be looking to the blaster manufacturer or the land speeder manufacturer. I mean, lots of rocks are going to be flipped over there to see if you can attach liability somewhere.
Yeah. The law will find a way to vindicate the rights of the person who was shot at a race. So the other interesting thing about the race itself is part of the track was not completed, and that's where tech decides to go and has one person follow. That's interesting. Why not have that closed? Because they're inviting people to race in it by having it accessible. So I'm not sure. That's something I would look at. I don't know if there's it pays off for him, but the other guy does crash. So is there liability there for the racetrack for having something that's incomplete and accessible?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this is a pretty straightforward episode.
Yeah, it was a fun. We just had like a really intense one with Crosshair and Cody, an execution at the end. Actually, 2 episodes in a row with executions at the end. So I think this was intentionally placed, like a little more lighthearted. It just felt like the nice, warm, familiar jacket of the middle part of the Phantom Menace. And yeah, the thing that was interesting to me is that in spite of everything that the Bad Batch continues to do, Sid still isn't in a great financial position. And I wonder if that comes to a head at some point, that whatever, either they're not bringing in a whole lot of money on these jobs, or she's doing things, just the way she's operating is really causing them to be on a treadmill of sorts.
That's a good observation. There's could be an economic downturn. There could be a variety of things at play with that. The other thing that's high risk is Tech One. He didn't race under an assumed name. Like, is the Empire monitoring? Like, are they doing like metadata monitoring for Tech? Tech, right. Is that his name? Like, there's video of him. Like, is that a good idea?
Yeah.
For someone trying to lay low? Like, maybe this is where an assumed name is a good idea, buddy. Paint up that armor, look different. Like, there's a.
It still isn't entirely, like, I know they had Cad Bane on their tail, but the degree of threat that the Empire considers them isn't really clear yet. It's clear that the Empire is cooking other bigger fish at this moment, so they're sort of an annoyance at best. But I feel like that's going to change at some point in the season, and it's probably going to be Vice Admiral Rampart who takes the lead on this stuff. But something that they do is going to have to catch the full attention of the Empire.
Yeah, that the Empire is busy. We're in what, year one, maybe year two of the Empire at best. So we're 14 to 13 years away from the events of Andor and Rebels. So there's a lot. I mean, like, it's very early. So they're still establishing their foothold and control over systems that are not down with this. So where will it go? I mean, I get the idea. Will they be part of the nascent rebellion as that starts forming up? Because people just don't. Those who are used to freedom just don't roll over. So they lose it gradually, piece by piece. So a giant, if somebody does a big move, that's the thing to watch for. But so yeah, we'll see what happens. But it's entertaining, and I'm grateful to have it each week. All right. Anything else for the good of the order from this episode?
No, this was a nice, I call it a palate cleanser episode, just one where the emotional stakes are in check, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I expect an immediate return to the darker stuff. You had one execution, now you're going to get two executions at the beginning of it. So yeah. the fun times can't continue.
It was a sorbet to cleanse the palate.
That's
like
right.
It's what we needed in order to get ready for something else.
As long as they don't mess with AZ Omega, obviously I want to be perfectly safe, but don't mess with AZ again. You about ripped my heart out at the end of season 1.
Yeah, that's one poor little torture droid that just keeps going through things. So yeah. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Again, this was faster, and we'll see if the next one's more intense. So better. But that, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and above all else, stay geeky.